Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles.
I'd love to know what you think. Every comment helps me make the next story better. Subscribe to stay tuned. When her boss pulled me aside at the Christmas party and told me what my wife had been saying about me for the past 6 months, I felt something inside me go completely still. But let me explain how we got to that moment. Standing in the marble hallway of the Petroleum Club while holiday music drifted from the ballroom and my marriage disintegrated with every word he spoke. We'd been married for 9 years. 9 years of what I thought was partnership, compromise, and building a life together. I had my own business ventures, did well for myself, stayed in shape, dressed well, took pride in being articulate and engaged. I tried to be a good husband, the kind of partner who showed up and paid attention. But somewhere around 8 or 9 months ago, things started changing in ways I couldn't quite name. It was like trying to identify the exact moment dusk becomes night. You know something has shifted, but you can't pinpoint when. It started small. The kind of small that makes you question whether you're being paranoid or observant. She'd step out of the room when taking phone calls. Not every time, but often enough that I noticed the pattern. Conversations would stop abruptly when I walked in, followed by that too bright smile that said everything's fine when it clearly wasn't. We used to talk about future plans together, dream about where we'd be in 5 years, what our lives would look like, what we wanted to build. But gradually, her language shifted to just her own trajectory, her goals, her timeline, her aspirations. I stopped being part of the future tense in her sentences, edited out like a character whose arc had ended, but the story continued. A mutual friend mentioned visiting her office and not seeing any photos of us on her desk. They'd been there before. When I asked about it, she said something vague about wanting a more professional appearance. She started keeping her social calendar private, claiming she needed work boundaries. At previous events, she'd introduce me with the bare minimum. This is my husband. No enthusiasm, no details, just an obligation being fulfilled. I noticed these things, stored them away, tried to convince myself I was being paranoid. Maybe this was just what happened in long marriages. Maybe everyone went through this phase. But deep down, I knew something fundamental had shifted. When she mentioned the company Christmas party, it was almost an afterthought. I suppose you should come. It's expected. Not I'd love you to meet my colleagues. Not it'll be fun. Just you should come because it's expected. I spent extra time getting ready that evening. New suit. Fresh haircut. I wanted to understand what had changed between us, and maybe seeing her in her element would give me answers. The Petroleum Club is one of those historic venues that makes you feel like you've stepped back into a different era. Marble columns reach toward vaulted ceilings. Brass fixtures catch the warm light. Crystal chandeliers hang from 20-foot ceilings, casting prismatic patterns across polished floors. About 150 people were milling around in cocktail attire, the sound of jazz music and laughter echoing off the high walls. Servers moved through the crowd with practiced efficiency, carrying trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. It was beautiful, elegant, the kind of place that demanded your best behavior and made you conscious of every movement, every word. In the car on the way there, my wife had been quiet, checking her phone constantly. Minimal conversation. When I tried to ask about who would be there, what I should know, she'd given one-word answers. But the moment we walked through those heavy wooden doors into the warm, golden light of the lobby, she transformed. It was like watching someone flip a switch. Her posture straightened. Her shoulders went back. Her smile fixed into place, bright and professional. And she walked ahead of me, not beside me, creating physical distance before we'd even entered the main ballroom. When colleagues approached to greet her, she was animated, laughing loudly at things that weren't particularly funny, touching their arms as she spoke, that casual intimacy you reserve for people you're comfortable with. "This is my husband," she'd say when they glanced at me, their eyes asking the question. Never my name, never who I was or what I did, never any detail that might make me a person rather than a role. Just "this is my husband." And then she'd move on, steering the conversation away from me before anyone could ask a follow-up question. I found myself standing near one of the bars, nursing a drink and watching. Really watching. Not with anger or hurt yet, but with the clinical detachment of someone gathering evidence for a case they didn't want to have to make. The way she positioned herself across the room from me, always maintaining at least 20 feet of distance. How she'd be enthusiastic and engaged, her whole body animated, until I approached her conversation circles. Then she'd become subdued and quiet, her energy visibly deflating. She physically created distance, standing close to colleagues, leaning in when they spoke, touching their shoulders or elbows, but keeping space for me like I carried something contagious. It wasn't subtle. It was deliberate, choreographed. At one point, someone mentioned a renovation project and asked me about it, a genuine question about my work. Before I could answer, my wife suddenly remembered she needed to check on something and walked away mid-conversation. Didn't excuse herself. Didn't finish listening to my response. Just left. The colleague looked confused, their smile faltering. I made polite conversation, filled the awkward gap her departure created, but I was noting the pattern. Every time a discussion might naturally include me, every time someone showed interest in my work or opinions, she found a reason to disappear. Like my visibility threatened something she'd carefully constructed. Then there was the moment when a group was discussing holiday plans, gathered around one of the high tables with drinks in hand. My wife mentioned a trip she was planning to somewhere warm. The Bahamas or Turks and Caicos, I couldn't quite hear. I didn't know about any trip. This was news to me, and we shared a bank account. Someone asked if we were both going, a natural question for someone's spouse. She laughed, that practiced professional laugh. Oh, it's more of a personal getaway. Solo recharge time. You know how it is. I was standing right there, maybe 10 feet away, close enough to hear every word. Learning about my wife's vacation plans from her coworkers. Watching her casually discuss taking a trip without me like I was an acquaintance she occasionally saw rather than someone she'd promised to spend her life with. In that moment, something clicked into place. All the little observations I'd been storing away, all the behaviors I'd been trying to explain away or rationalize, they suddenly formed a complete picture. And it wasn't a picture of a marriage. It was a picture of someone slowly, methodically, editing me out of their life story. Around 7:45, I'd stepped out onto the terrace. The city lights spread out below, cold December air clearing my head. I was processing what I'd witnessed all evening when I heard footsteps behind me. A man in his late 50s approached, distinguished looking, the kind of presence that comes from years in leadership. "I've been wanting to meet you properly," he said, extending his hand. "May I have a word in private?" He introduced himself as a senior executive, my wife's boss. He led me to a quieter hallway away from the party, and I could tell by his expression that whatever he was about to say was weighing on him. "I'm going to be direct with you," he began, his voice low and serious, "because you deserve to know what's been happening. I've been in management for 30 years, and I've learned that when someone consistently speaks negatively about their spouse, there's usually a reason. Your wife has been quite vocal about her feelings regarding your marriage." The cold from the terrace had nothing on what I felt then. My chest tightened. What has she been saying? He took a breath, clearly uncomfortable but committed to honesty. For the past 6 months, she's made comments in team meetings and over lunch about feeling held back by her personal life. She's mentioned feeling embarrassed by certain choices she made when she was younger. She's talked about how different her life would be if she'd waited to settle down, how she could have gone further, done more, been someone different. I nodded slowly, absorbing this, each word landing like a physical blow. "Go on." Last month, at a leadership retreat, during dinner, she was asked about her support system. We were discussing work-life balance, how we maintain relationships while pursuing ambitious careers. He paused, meeting my eyes directly, wanting me to understand the full context. She said, and I quote, "My husband is my biggest regret. I should have focused on my career instead of settling." Multiple people heard her say this. It wasn't a private confession whispered to a trusted friend. It was stated as fact in front of a table of 8 colleagues. Matter of fact, like she was commenting on the weather. The hallway seemed to tilt slightly. My biggest regret. She'd said those words out loud to her colleagues, to her boss, to people I'd never even met. This wasn't an isolated incident, he continued. She's made similar comments to various colleagues. She's actively distanced herself from you professionally. When asked about family, she changes the subject or says her marriage is complicated. Some colleagues didn't even know she was married until recently. He looked at me with something like sympathy. "I'm telling you this because I don't tolerate this kind of behavior in my organization. Whatever problems exist in a marriage should be handled privately, with respect. What she's been doing, publicly diminishing you, that speaks to character. And tonight, watching how she's treated you here, I knew you had no idea what she's been saying. You deserve to know the truth." I felt my hands go cold despite the heating in the hallway. My vision seemed to sharpen, like everything had been slightly blurred before, and now I could see clearly. Every strange behavior over the past months suddenly made perfect sense. She hadn't been pulling away. She'd already left. She'd just never bothered to tell me. "Thank you," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "Thank you for telling me this. I know that took courage, and I appreciate your honesty more than you know." "What are you going to do?" he asked. I looked back toward the ballroom where my wife was probably still laughing with colleagues, still playing whatever role she'd decided to inhabit. Something I should have done a long time ago. I'm going to stop pretending everything is fine. I walked back into the ballroom. The party was in full swing now. People mingling with drinks. Small groups clustered around high tables. There was a small stage at the front with a microphone where the company president had made opening remarks earlier. It was tradition at these events for people to make informal toasts throughout the evening. I crossed the ballroom with purpose. My wife noticed from across the room. Her face registered confusion. I made eye contact with her boss, who gave me a slight nod. Then I stepped onto the stage and picked up the microphone. Tapped it gently. Testing. Good. I have everyone's attention. The room quieted. People turned toward the stage. I could see my wife's face going pale as she realized what was happening. "Good evening, everyone." I began, keeping my tone warm and conversational, like I was about to tell a funny story from the holiday season. "For those who don't know me, I'm the husband of one of your colleagues. We've been married for 9 years, though I'm learning tonight that some of you didn't even know she was married, which is interesting, isn't it?" There was some light laughter, confused looks, people glancing at each other, trying to figure out where this was going. My wife had frozen in place across the ballroom, her champagne glass halfway to her lips. "I came here tonight thinking this would be a nice evening. A chance to celebrate the holidays, meet the people my wife works with, share in her professional world. I even bought a new suit for the occasion. Wanted to make a good impression." I paused, let that sink in. Let them see me as someone who'd made an effort, who'd cared. But something happened tonight that changed my perspective entirely. See, I had a very enlightening conversation with someone who cared enough to tell me the truth about what's been happening behind closed doors. Or rather, what's been discussed quite openly among many of you here. The room had gone completely quiet now. The jazz music had stopped between songs. Even the servers had paused in their rounds. People were exchanging glances, some looking guilty, others confused, a few with dawning recognition on their faces. My wife was trying to move toward the stage, but colleagues were backing away from her, creating a barrier, leaving her isolated in a small circle of space. Apparently, my wife has spent the past 6 months telling various people in this room that I'm her biggest regret, that she wishes she'd focused on her career instead of settling for marriage, that she's embarrassed by choices she made when she was younger, by which she means choosing to marry me. I could hear people murmuring. Someone gasped. My wife had stopped moving, frozen mid-step. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not angry that she feels this way. People's feelings change. Marriages end. That's life. My voice hardened slightly. What I'm angry about is that she said these things to all of you before she ever said them to me. Complete silence now. There's something deeply cruel about publicly dismantling a relationship while maintaining the pretense of that relationship in private. It's one thing to fall out of love. It's another thing entirely to humiliate your spouse behind their back while keeping them in the dark about how you really feel. I could see my wife trying to speak, but I raised my hand. I've spent months wondering why my wife seemed distant, why she acted differently around me than around others, why she introduced me like I was a stranger she'd just met. Tonight, I got my answer. She's been auditioning for a life without me while I was still trying to fix whatever I thought was broken. I placed my hand back on the microphone stand. So here's my toast. To honesty. To having the courage to end something directly instead of destroying it slowly from the inside. To respecting people enough to tell them the truth, even when it's difficult. I paused, looking directly at my wife. And specifically to my wife. Congratulations. You just got your biggest wish granted. As of this moment, I am no longer your husband in any meaningful sense. The paperwork will follow, but consider yourself free of your biggest regret. You don't have to pretend anymore. You don't have to introduce me to anyone. You don't have to be embarrassed by the choices you made when you were younger. The silence was absolute. I hope your career brings you everything you wanted. I really do. Because you just sacrificed everything else for it. I placed the microphone back on the stand and walked off the stage. The silence followed me across the ballroom. My wife stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. Colleagues were stepping away from her, creating physical distance. Her boss was watching with clear disappointment. I made it to the coat check when she caught up to me, her heels clicking rapidly on the marble floor. "Wait," she said, grabbing my arm with both hands. "We need to talk. You can't just do this. You can't just walk out." I turned to look at her. Really look at her. Her makeup was running. Her carefully styled hair was coming loose. She looked desperate and small. "Can't do what? Tell the truth? The same truth you've been telling everyone here for months? How could you do that to me?" Her voice was shaking, oscillating between anger and panic. "In front of everyone I work with. Do you have any idea what you've done? You've destroyed my reputation. Everyone heard that. Everyone." The audacity of that statement almost made me laugh. It bubbled up from somewhere dark and bitter. "I destroyed your reputation? Let's be very clear about what happened here. You spent 6 months telling your colleagues that marrying me was your biggest regret. You made our private relationship a public topic of discussion. You humiliated me behind my back to people I'd never even met. People whose opinions apparently mattered more to you than mine did. All I did was stop participating in the lie. Everything I said up there was true. Every single word. You don't get to play victim because I finally called you out on your behavior." "I never said those exact words," she tried, her voice taking on that defensive edge I knew too well. "People misunderstood. They took things out of context. Your boss quoted you directly. 'My husband is my biggest regret.' Those were your words. He was sitting at the same table. Multiple people heard you. Are you calling all of them liars?" She switched tactics, her expression shifting from defensive to accusatory. "You've been distant too. You've pulled away. This isn't all my fault. It takes 2 people to destroy a marriage. I was distant because I was responding to your distance. I was trying to figure out what was wrong. You already knew what was wrong. You just didn't have the courage to tell me." "You're being too sensitive," she said, her voice taking on that patronizing tone I'd heard more and more lately. "It's just work talk. Calling your husband your biggest regret isn't work talk. It's a declaration. And you made it publicly, repeatedly." Her composure cracked. "Everyone's going to think I'm a terrible person. That's what you're worried about? Not that you hurt me. Not that you lied to me. Just what people think of you. That tells me everything I need to know about where your priorities are." "We can fix this," she said desperately. "Therapy. I'll change. Please." I shook my head. "You can't unring this bell. You can't unhear what I heard tonight. And you can't make me unknow that for 6 months, you've been wishing you'd never married me. That's not something couples therapy can fix. So that's it." Tears were streaming down her face now. 9 years, and you're just walking away?" "No," I said quietly. 9 years, and you walked away. You walked away months ago when you started telling everyone you regretted marrying me. I'm just finally catching up to where you've already been. The difference is, when I leave, I'll do it honestly. I'll tell you directly that I'm done. I won't spend months bad-mouthing you to people while pretending everything's fine. That's the difference between us. I still have respect for you, even now. You clearly lost respect for me a long time ago." I put on my coat. "I'll be at my brother's place in Weston. I'll arrange for my things next week." "You can't just leave," she said. "Watch me." I walked out into the December night. I could hear her crying behind me, colleagues watching from the doorway. For the first time in months, I felt like I could actually breathe. My brother was waiting up when I arrived at his house. He took one look at my face. "What happened?" I told him the story over whiskey. When I finished, he just shook his head. "About damn time you stood up for yourself. I've been watching her treat you like that for a year. We all have." That night, I slept better than I had in months. Over the next week, my phone flooded with messages from my wife. The progression told its own story, like watching someone go through the stages of grief, but in reverse. Day 1, she was angry. "How dare you embarrass me like that? You had no right to air our private issues in public. You're vindictive and cruel." Day 2 was bargaining. "We can fix this. Please come home. I'll do whatever it takes. We can go to therapy. I'll change. Just come back so we can talk face to face." Day 3 shifted to blame. "You forced me into this situation. If you'd been more attentive, more understanding, I wouldn't have felt the need to vent to my colleagues. This is as much your fault as mine." By day 4, reality was setting in. Everyone at work is treating me differently. People won't make eye contact. The conversation stops when I walk into a room. I don't know how to fix this. Day 5 brought genuine panic. I think I made a terrible mistake. I didn't mean those things the way they sounded. I was frustrated and took it out on you unfairly. Please, we need to talk. Day 6 was desperation. My boss wants to meet about workplace culture and professional judgment. I think my promotion is off the table. Everything I've worked for is falling apart. Please respond. I responded only through my lawyer. Short, professional communications about logistics. When I'd pick up my things. How we divide assets. The timeline for filing paperwork. I filed for divorce immediately. Maintained my dignity throughout. I didn't badmouth her publicly, didn't post about it on social media, didn't try to turn people against her or share the story beyond my immediate circle. I didn't need to. The truth had done that on its own, spreading through her professional network like ripples from a stone dropped in still water. Friends started reaching out. We heard what happened. We always knew something was off. I realized how many people had noticed her behavior but stayed quiet, not wanting to interfere. It made me wonder how long I'd been the only one who couldn't see it. As for my wife, the consequences unfolded naturally. Someone had recorded the toast on their phone. The video circulated. Her colleagues' trust in her was damaged. If she'd publicly disrespect her spouse, what else was she capable of? Her boss called a meeting about judgment and professionalism. The promotion she'd been expecting got quietly postponed. She wasn't fired, but her reputation was tarnished. She learned that career advancement requires more than ambition. It requires character. 2 months later, I was living in my own apartment in Cambridge. My business was thriving. I'd had more time and energy to focus on it. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected during my marriage. Started running again. Pursued hobbies I'd set aside. I felt lighter, more authentically myself. Then I got an unexpected email. It was from a woman who'd attended the Christmas party. She wasn't from my wife's company. She'd been someone's date, there by circumstance rather than obligation. But she'd witnessed the whole thing, stood in that ballroom, and watched it unfold. I know this is strange, she wrote, but I was incredibly moved by your honesty that night. I'm also going through a divorce, and watching you stand up for yourself gave me courage to do the same. I've spent 2 years trying to fix something that was already broken, making excuses for behavior I should have called out long ago. Seeing you draw that line in the sand, refusing to accept being diminished, it showed me what self-respect actually looks like. Would you be interested in coffee sometime? Just as 2 people who understand what it's like to walk away from something everyone else thinks you should fight for. I didn't respond immediately. Read her email 3 times, trying to determine if this was genuine or something else. I wasn't ready for a relationship. Wasn't even sure I wanted to date. But I was intrigued by someone who valued honesty and courage, who saw the toast not as a dramatic spectacle, but as a necessary act of self-preservation. Eventually, I agreed to coffee as friends, nothing more, making that boundary clear in my response. She was a curator at a museum. Intelligent, direct. Our conversation felt natural, unforced. No games. No pretense. This is what it should feel like, I realized. 3 months after the Christmas party, my wife requested a meeting to sign final divorce papers. We met at a coffee shop in Back Bay. Neutral territory. She looked different. Thinner. Tired. A different energy about her. I owe you an apology, she said, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. Not the confident professional voice, not the defensive anger from the hallway. Something genuine and raw. I listened as she explained her thinking, didn't interrupt, let her get it all out. She'd felt trapped by marrying early, she said. 23 seems so young now. She resented choosing partnership over career opportunities that might have been available if she'd stayed single, stayed mobile, stayed unattached. Started blaming me for her own choices, for the roads not taken that might have led somewhere more impressive. Convinced herself I was holding her back, that my contentment with our life was somehow preventing her from achieving more. Realized too late I wasn't the problem. Her attitude was. Her need to blame someone else for her own fears and insecurities. The worst part is, I turned you into someone you weren't, she said, tears starting to fall again. In my mind, I made you the obstacle to my success. But you were never preventing me from anything. You never told me not to pursue opportunities. You never asked me to choose between you and my career. I was using you as an excuse for my own fears about whether I was good enough, whether I deserved the success I wanted. And when you made that toast, when you laid it all out in front of everyone, I was furious. Absolutely furious. But then I watched it back. Someone sent me the video a few days later. I saw my own face. I saw how I looked when you started talking. The guilt, the shame, the realization dawning that everyone could see what I'd been doing. And I realized you were right about everything. Every word you said was true. I appreciate the apology, I said. But here's what you need to understand. Even if you'd never said those things about me to your colleagues, our marriage was already over. Because respect isn't something you can fake. And somewhere along the way, you stopped respecting me. Maybe it was because I was too comfortable. Maybe it was because I reminded you of choices you questioned. But the moment you started seeing me as an embarrassment instead of a partner, we were done. The rest was just waiting for someone to say it out loud. Do you hate me? She asked. No. I'm disappointed. I'm sad about the years we wasted. But I don't hate you. I think you're someone who got so focused on where you thought you should be that you forgot to appreciate where you were. I hope you figure that out before you ruin your next relationship. We signed the papers. She cried a little. I stayed composed. For what it's worth, she said as we were leaving, you deserved better than how I treated you. Yes, I did. But now I know that. And I won't accept less again. 6 months after the Christmas party, my life looked completely different. The divorce was finalized. My business had expanded enough that I'd hired 2 people. My apartment was decorated to my taste. I'd reconnected with parts of myself that had gotten lost in my marriage. The museum curator had become a significant person in my life. We weren't rushing into anything. We'd both learned from our failed marriages. But there was a genuine connection growing. She appreciated my directness because she valued honesty. I appreciated her confidence because she wasn't threatened by my success. One evening, we had dinner at a restaurant near Faneuil Hall. She was talking about an exhibit she was curating with genuine excitement. She asked my opinion on the marketing strategy, valued my input, saw my business experience as an asset, not a threat. We laughed easily, debated ideas, challenged each other. This is what partnership looks like, I thought. Later that month, I ran into my ex-wife at a business networking event. Pure chance. She was there with colleagues. She looked healthier, more genuine somehow. There was growth there, though not redemption. You look good, she said when she saw me. Happy. I am. I responded honestly. I'm glad. You deserve that. She meant it. So do you. I hope you find it. She introduced me to a colleague standing nearby. This is my ex-husband. He runs an excellent business. She used my name. Gave me credit. It showed growth. I was polite, but not interested in reconnecting. Good luck with everything. Later, my girlfriend asked how it felt seeing my ex-wife. Nothing, really, I said. Just nothing. Which I guess means I've moved on. She squeezed my hand. Good. People sometimes ask me if I regret how I handled the Christmas party. If I wish I'd been more private, more mature, less dramatic about the whole thing. The answer is no. My ex-wife made our marriage a public spectacle when she told her colleagues I was her biggest regret. She humiliated me in front of people I'd never met. She destroyed our relationship publicly while I was still trying to save it privately. All I did was refuse to participate in the lie anymore. I told the truth publicly, yes, but I matched the energy she'd already put into the world. Maybe that was harsh. Maybe it was dramatic. But it was also necessary. Because sometimes the only way to end something that's been slowly poisoning you is to cut it out completely, dramatically, finally. I don't regret the toast. I regret not making it 6 months earlier. At a different company's Christmas party 1 year later, I stood with a drink watching couples interact. My girlfriend approached and kissed my cheek. You look deep in thought, she said. Just remembering last Christmas. How different things were. Better or worse? I looked at her. Genuine smile. No pretense. No games. So much better. The best toasts, I've learned, aren't the ones that celebrate what you have. They're the ones that honor what you've learned to walk away from. Dear listeners, that's our ending. If it resonated, subscribe to support the channel. See you next time.